Hello, I'm Steve,
And I'm Scott.
and together we're Backyard Musings. We're the science and technology channel. And today, as you can see, we're going to be talking about cannabis use disorder, and its effects. So, in Canada, hospital visits for cannabis related issues spiked by 270%, with young men being the most vulnerable. A study in Ontario found that schizophrenia cases linked to cannabis use disorder have more than doubled since cannabis legalization. This is from a study published on February 4th in the JAMA Network Open by researchers from ICES, the Ottawa Hospital, the University of Ottawa's Department of Family Medicine, and the Brier Health Research Institute analyzed healthcare data from all Ontario residents. Would you like to know more?
Okay, so if you're looking at that slide on the screen, the number of new schizophrenia cases linked to cannabis use disorder, CUD, has more than doubled in Ontario, rising from 4% before legalization to 10% after. That's a huge increase, according to new research. The researchers examined whether the liberalization of medical cannabis in 2015 and the legalization of non-medical cannabis in 2018 influenced the association between cannabis use disorder and new schizophrenia diagnosis.
So, just for perspective, Ontario is right across the river from Detroit. That's where Ontario is.
Yeah, central. It's the eastern central, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it? What's on
After
the far?
adjusting for
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
the what's on the what?
I was going to say I'm trying to think of the different. What do they call them? Provinces, right? So there's British Columbia. There's Alberta.
Quebec, yeah, Saskatchewan,
Okay.
Manitoba, or is that a
So
city, Manitoba?
it's on the eastern. It's kind of on the east, towards the eastern side, if it's above Detroit. So
Right, it's right next to Detroit.
gotcha.
Yeah, across the river. Okay, after adjusting for differences between individuals with and without hospital care for a CUD, the authors estimated that during the legalization period, 10% of new cases of schizophrenia could have been prevented if people with cannabis use severe enough to require care in the emergency department or hospital had not stopped using cannabis. In men aged 14 to 24, that percentage rose to 18%.
So that's cannabis is a kind of a relaxant drug.
Yeah.
Some people don't call it a drug; they call it a weed. But from the cannabis, I think of today versus the cannabis that was maybe 50 or 60 years ago, from what I've been told, it's a lot more potent.
Today?
Today's cannabis, yeah, they and not only that, but I think there's a lot of concern about laced cannabis. So in other words, they're spraying it with something or they're dipping it in something to kind of give it a little extra bump. Um, so that might have something to do with it. But it's I'm trying to put in perspective. Like Colorado, I think they were the first state in the 50 states to legalize marijuana for recreational use, and I know the feds weren't real. Not that this is not on topic so much, but I know the feds weren't real clear or weren't real happy about that because it's still a federal offense, but it's starting to be legal in a lot of states, California included, and you can I don't know, you can kind of get an idea that it's just it's not a help, that's for sure. So anyway, this is a quote: "Regular cannabis use is strongly associated with an increased risk of schizophrenia, and one of the main areas of uncertainty surrounding cannabis legalization is whether there would be changes in the number of new cases of schizophrenia." And that's quoted by Dr. Daniel Myran, a Canada Research Chair in Social Accountability at the University of Ottawa, ICES, adjunct scientist, investigator at the Bureau Health Research Institute, and associate scientist at the Ottawa Hospital. So he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
Another quote from him is: "We found that there have been concerning increases over time in the percentage of people with a new schizophrenia diagnosis who had received care for cannabis use disorder before their diagnosis. So, I don't know.
Okay, the study included all Ontario residents aged 14 to 65 years and eligible for universal health care. That's over 13.5 million individuals, and considered three policy time periods between 2006 and 2022, before legalization, after liberalization of medical cannabis, and after legalization of non-medical cannabis. A total of 118,650 individuals, which is 0.9% of the population of Ontario, had an emergency department visit or hospitalization for a CUD. That's almost 1%, which is
Yeah.
kind of high.
Yeah, I would think so.
Over the study period, 10,583, which is 9% of individuals with CUD, developed schizophrenia, compared to 80,523 of individuals without CUD.
I mean, these guys got to be smoking a lot of weed. Holy mackerel. Or eating it or whatever they're doing with it.
I guess it's the potency too, like you talked about.
Yeah. I wonder what the productivity rate is of Ontario, Canada. Anyway, our study highlights the growing public health challenge posed by the combination of increasingly high potency cannabis and rising regular cannabis use. Says Dr. Myron. The authors highlight that the study does not settle out ongoing debates about whether or not heavy cannabis use can cause schizophrenia. Nevertheless, the authors note that the heavy cannabis use does worsen symptoms and the prognosis for those living with schizophrenia, and caution about the trends observed in the study.
Hey, here's a quote. The tripling of schizophrenia cases associated with the cannabis use disorder over the past 17 years and rising cases of psychosis underscores the urgent need for targeted prevention strategies, particularly for younger populations who appear to be at greater risk, says Dr. Myron.
Yeah, kind of crazy. Schizophrenia is a serious mental health condition that affects the way a person thinks, acts, and feels. It can also interfere with a person's ability to think clearly, manage emotions, make decisions, and relate to others. It affects around 2.8 million adults in the U.S. Yet each person's experience is different. People with schizophrenia are typically diagnosed in their late teens to early 20s, with women generally experience symptoms slightly later than men. Schizophrenia affects people of all ages, but with treatment, it can be managed.
So here's some positive symptoms. There's positive and negative of schizophrenia. So the positive symptoms are hallucinations, delusions, difficulty thinking or speaking.
The negative side of that are difficulty staying motivated to complete tasks. That could also be from the use of marijuana. Decreased sense of joy or happiness, showing little emotion, not smiling or using facial expressions, and social withdrawal.
So some of the cognitive symptoms of schizophrenia are trouble with memory, difficulty understanding and making decisions, and difficulty paying attention. So we're not trying to be holier than thou and tell you not to smoke cannabis or weed or Buddha, sass, whatever, reefer, whatever you want to call it. There's health risks associated with it. It's you're being impaired when you do it.
Yeah, so I was just talking before we got on that I had a friend, high school friend, that later in life continued to smoke cannabis, marijuana, and he lost his eyesight. And it was, for a long time, he lost his eyesight. And then he was able to get an operation to get some of his sight back. But they highly recommended that he stop or cut back on that consumption. So I don't know whether he did or not, but I hope he did. Eyesight's a pretty important thing. So, but yeah, it's again, it's a drug that makes you kind of lackadaisical and lazy, and you just
Gives
on
you
the
the
lighter
munchies.
side, you just want to sit around and eat.
Gives you the
and do
munchies.
nothing. Watch TV or listen to music or sit around and eat. And it's not real good. So And like I said, I think the marijuana of when I was growing up is a lot more potent and detrimental to people than I don't remember anybody ever becoming schizophrenic. I remember a lot of people that I think were schizophrenic that I think it may have helped them if they smoked marijuana, but I don't know. This is a scary thing. And again, that I wonder if there's ever been any tests like this in the US. So I don't know.
Well, you mentioned that the more potency, they lace it with something. Is that like an upcharge? Do you pay extra for the lacing?
I don't know. I have no idea on that, but they'll do that to, it's like anything else, it's like giving you a certain kind of candy, and then, you eventually become used to that candy, and then you want a sweeter candy, or you want a better candy, or, that's going to give you a better high. And so I think they try to, it's just like anything else that's marketable, I'm talking about. It's, it's an enticement. If you're buying weed from the guy down the street and you're getting high for an hour or two, or you're buying weed from the guy next door to him and you're getting high for a half a day, where are you going to go? You're going to go where you get the most money for your buck, even though you're probably better off doing it for a couple hours rather than a half a day, because you got to work. But I don't know. It just, my whole thing on it now is just don't do it. I'm like with Nancy Reagan, just say no, don't do it.
You seem to be a marijuana expert.
No, I'm not an expert in marijuana. Thank you. Okay. Thanks. Make sure. Yeah, I hope our bishop is watching the show.
But so if our listeners, if you can tell us, is there an upcharge for lacing it with different whatever? Let us know. I'm curious if you pay extra. Just curious.
If we have any cannabis salesmen out there, give us a comment or two on that. Because and it's funny, when I was a school bus driver, we had to walk our bus every day, actually after every school, and occasionally you'd find marijuana on the bus, and you'd find plastic containers. They look like regular pill containers, and they had flavors. Like, you could go to these cannabis stores and buy different flavors. I mean, that's pretty crazy. So that's what I'm talking about.
Enticing kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Strawberry flavored or cinnamon flavored or whatever. I mean, it's crazy. Maybe one day we should go to further our study. We should walk into a cannabis dispensary and see what they got. So
just check it out, huh?
Yeah. Just check it out. So
for educational purposes.
Right? Of course, for educational purpose.
All right, folks. Thanks for joining us today.
Take care, everyone. Good.